Hello and welcome to You've Seen It Before, movie reviews with connections in mind. Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence have been nearly guaranteed box office gold in recent years, with Chris Pratt in the Guardians of the Galaxy and Jurassic World, and Jennifer Lawrence with her Hunger Games and X-Men movies under her belt. Now, both have teamed up in Passengers, a film in which the two characters are on a ship heading to another planet, and they find themselves waking up from their cryosleep 90 years too early, stranded on this ship alone together. This film had a lot going for it heading into its release, but inevitably there will be several things in this film that you have seen before. Now, this video will contain spoilers of Passengers, as well as several other films and TV series. There's a full list in the description below, and if you haven't seen Passengers yet, or any of the films or TV series, at least heard of them in the description below, and want to wait until you have seen these, stop the video at this point and come back later. With that in mind though, let's begin.
Here we go again?
No, not again.
You've been before.
How long have we been doing this?
Once more unto
And again until we're both dead.
Passengers, the story of Chris Pratt as Jim Preston, a mechanic from Denver, Colorado, who embarks on the Avalon to take a 120-year voyage in suspended animation to another planet, to start a new life. His plans are turned upside down when his cryopod breaks down and he finds himself alone, unable to go back to sleep, and 90 years away from his destination. Things change, of course, when a woman enters his life. Now, this film has several aspects that borrow on films and TV series that have come before it, so let's start with the obvious and go from there. Now, conceptually, this film is nothing unique in the way that it portrays a castaway. The only unique kind of twist about it is in space, but we've already seen castaways in space, mainly The Martian, in recent years. But on further reflection, this film has a lot of things in common with the TV series Stargate Universe. Both feature a group of people, whether it be 2 people or about 100 in the case of Stargate Universe, stranded on a ship that they know very little about initially, and they're both locked out of the main systems of the ship, mainly because they're essentially passengers and they don't have crew access. Both also are stranded a long way away from home, or any destination that they're going to, and yeah, it's basically them contained on the ship. Now, of course, there are some differences between these two. I mean, for one, Stargate Universe has about 100 people and a team of people that they can communicate with on Earth, and Passengers is just a story of Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence together. So it's basically 2 people. 3 if you count the robot bartender Arthur, played by Michael Sheen. And, of course, Stargate Universe has a Stargate on its ship that can let them go to other places besides the ship. More importantly, both ships end up falling apart, and it's up to whatever crew is on hand in either case to fix it. I mean, these are very different endeavors, the film Passengers in the series Stargate Universe, but it's actually very surprising at how very incredibly similar these are. Next, there's a certain similarity with the way this film portrays its science, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it's good to see science fiction films actually accurately depicting scientific advances and concepts in a science fiction film so that it's believable and accurate, and it makes it really cool. But this is not nearly the first film to do that, and the way it shows it is basically taking that for granted on what's come before. The things that come to mind are the design of the ship, the Avalon. It basically creates gravity by rotating around in a circle endlessly as it goes through space. Hence, the centrifugal force creates the gravity that they're sucked onto. And that's accurate. And, in fact, the gravity stops on a couple of occasions when the ship stops turning. Of course, this is nothing new because films like 2001: Space Odyssey Moonraker and more recently Interstellar have all shown this, and in my opinion, much better. Even with Moonraker's obvious gigantic wire set going on there. And then the other thing that was interesting about the science fiction is the holy grail of modern science fiction medicine is depicted in this film by the Avalon's infirmary has an autodoc, which is basically a giant tube that you lay down in, and it can diagnose and theoretically treat you of most everything. Doesn't work out so well for another character, Lawrence Fishburne's character, that wakes up later, but that's another story. Essentially, this is the thing that we want to have in the future. Of course, this concept has been shown a couple times before, most notably in Elysium and Prometheus. Now, of course, this film's crux is the eventual romance that develops between Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence's characters, because they're alone on this ship, and they want to, they're both alone, but they want to be together, hence the romance that comes off. But in a lot of ways, it's actually kind of surprising that this film kind of ripped off WALL-E in a way. If you think about it, Chris Pratt's character is a mechanic, down-to-earth kind of guy who knows how to be very inventive with what he has on hand, but his tastes are theoretically very lowbrow. Whereas Jennifer Lawrence's character is a writer/journalist who's going to this planet because she wants to write about the story and then go back to Earth and tell everyone on Earth about this, instead of Chris Pratt's character who wants to go to the homestead to start a new life because he basically wanted to. And that's very similar to how WALL-E is the down-to-earth kind of robot who is very slavish to his program. He's very inventive, but his tastes are kind of unusual. And then Eve is the high-tech robot whose whole sole function is to go to another planet, report, and then go back to a certain point to report what she found. And she has theoretically high taste. Also, WALL-E features a very important segment of the film, in which case Eve basically shuts down for a good long segment of the film, and WALL-E's basically essentially courting her in this inanimate state where she can't hear him, but he's doing all these romantic things like rowing her down a pile of sewage, playing Pong with her or whatever. And that's very reminiscent of what happens in Passengers, where Chris Pratt's character discovers Jennifer Lawrence's character sleeping in the cryotube, and he's basically learning all about her by browsing the ship's information directory and what's recorded in there about her and her personal information, and she can't interact with him, but it's a very one-way relationship at that point. Very reminiscent, which also culminates in both WALL-E and Passengers have their first official date of sorts, end up with the two main characters basically swinging around in space, free of the ship. I wasn't expecting that, but on firm reflection, that's a very interesting similarity. It's cool, but it's definitely something you've seen before. Now, let's talk about the finale of this film, in which the two passengers, Pratt and Lawrence, are going through the romantic stuff, ins and outs, and then the ship is basically breaking down to a point where things are starting to get bad very fast, and Lawrence Fishburne's character wakes up and he has command level access because he's an original member of the crew. This allows Pratt and Lawrence to go to the engine room and figure out what exactly is going on. It turns out the fusion reactor that powers the Avalon is going insane. The fusion reaction is getting out of control. The only way to save the ship is to vent the excess energy into space. Chris Pratt's character dons a spacesuit, goes outside to fix the door that's somehow sealed shut. The control mechanism doesn't work from the engineering room, but it will only stay open if if he stays there and physically turns the lever that allows this door to stay open. So there's this exchange between Pratt and Lawrence where they say, "No, don't leave me, and I have to do this to save all the people who are asleep on the ship still. Please, just do it." And so eventually they do it, and the ship gets saved because Chris Pratt's character stays behind to do this because he's also basically in the damage path of the venting of this very powerful energy. Now this is very reminiscent of Armageddon in a way, in the finale, in which Bruce Willis's character has to stay behind and manually detonate the bomb in order to save Earth. And also, interestingly enough, this is a very common trope. Another example that I can think of is there's an episode of another Stargate series, Stargate Atlantis, in which our main heroes are trapped in a leaking ship inside an underwater hangar, and the other another character has to hold a lever down inside an underwater a control room that's been flooded in order to lower the water in the main hangar so that our heroes can escape. But he's putting himself in danger by having to do that. So there's a couple examples of, you've seen that kind of ending before. Now, this isn't a perfect comparison, but I found that a very common trope in Castaway-style movies is the person, or maybe a couple of people, who are stranded in wherever the situation they are, ship, an island, what have you. They eventually end up talking to an inanimate object, or at least a non-human object, in order to basically keep themselves from going completely insane by crushing loneliness. Now, this is perfectly encapsulated in the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks and his inanimate object he talks to, Wilson, and they have a great rapport going on there. Now, that role is of the basically sounding board for the Castaway is played by Michael Sheen's Arthur, the robotic bartender. Now, it's not a perfect analogy, as I said, because obviously the robot can talk back to Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence, so it's not like it's a completely inanimate object, but it's a comparison nonetheless because they're both non-human characters who they're talking to because it's their only recourse. Now, as to whether or not you should see this film, I would say you should see this film, but not necessarily in theaters. I feel like this is more of a go see it at a Redbox, or if it comes up on a Netflix scroll at one point in time, see it there. And that's for a couple of reasons. It's not for the look of the film. I feel like as far as a sci-fi film coming out at this specific time, it looks as good as it can get. I mean, this is a very polished film. I really like the design of the Avalon, the ship, and I really like the little details they put in, like the Art Deco fresco painting of the ship inside the bar, and like especially the swimming pool scene when the gravity shuts off. That is an amazing scene. That is very tension filled. But there are a couple of plot-related problems I have with this film, and they're both kind of interconnected. The first of which is, I felt like there's a certain disconnect between how this movie's trailers portrayed this film to be going and what the actual finished product was. The trailers actually, I felt like they portrayed it as Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence characters, their pods malfunction, they wake up about the same time, and their romance develops because by some fluke they woke up at the same time, and they have to be a man and woman, and they fall in love with each other, and then they have to face whatever problems are happening with the ship as a couple whose romance evolved that way. What actually happens is how there's a departure, and it presents the mortalum of this film, in which Chris Pratt's character actually wakes up first, then spends a year on this ship alone with only the robot butler Arthur as company, and he gets very lonely and depressed and eventually suicidal, and he discovers Jennifer Lawrence's character in her cryotube asleep, and he basically falls in love with her because she looks pretty, and then he finds out about her by whatever profile material and some videos that they had in the ship's archive about her, and then he makes the conscious decision to wake her up from her cryosleep when she's just fine, and that's because he doesn't want to be alone anymore, and he really likes her based on what he sees in the in the whatever profile material he read, and then their romance develops with the back knowledge that he woke her up intentionally, and they proceed forward, and then of course that's eventually revealed. But the way that happened, so I felt like that would be a stronger character, stronger story if it happened more organically and they woke up at the same time rather than having that moral dilemma. But I'm okay with the moral dilemma because it presents an interesting twist. That interesting twist, though, I feel like is undermined by the way they presented the story in whatever order they presented it. Specifically, the filmmakers made the decision that they wanted this reveal to be known to the audience early on in the film. I mean, it's probably within the first, 45 minutes or so that we see Chris Pratt's character discover Jennifer Lawrence, and then they do a quick montage of him deliberating whether or not to wake her or not, and the moral implications of that for probably about a month in movie time. That's what the montage is basically covering, I feel like. And then they show his conscious choice to wake her up, and so we have that knowledge going forward. And when the reveal happens that he woke her up and she finds out, then I feel like that moment got undermined because I felt like that should have been saved for the end, and it turns out that the original screenplay for this film actually presented it that way. I felt like they should have saved that because I feel like after that they gave us the audience a lot of time to kind of digest that, and I think that's what they were trying to go for, that we should be thinking about these moral quandaries that came up, like, it's not okay, but is it kind of understandable? That's the kind of direction that I felt like they were going for, and by the amount of time that they gave us to think about that, I felt like they just didn't devote enough time to the romance for those kind of questions to be brought up, but not really internalized and discussed inside for very long before the ship's problems crop up and then they have to deal with that. I felt like it would have been much more powerful if their romance, what most of the movie was devoted to their romance evolving organically, them showing us this so we could walk along with them and then hit us with the reveal so that we would have less time to digest what's happening, be more frantic, and then therefore empathize with Jennifer Lawrence's character, because when it happens, she's obviously going through a lot of emotions, as would be very understandable. It's like, how could you do this to me? I mean, this is basically where I still love you, but how could you do this to me? That would be a very powerful film, but it didn't do that. And I felt like this film is hurt because of that decision, because the actual time devoted to their romantic development is basically a montage that's narrated by Jennifer Lawrence as like she's writing it as a book because she's a writer, and that I felt like it lost some power there. And then the film's ending, after everything is said and done with the ship's better. If you've made it this far into the film, even with the warning of spoilers, and you haven't seen Passengers yet, I'm not going to spoil that part because I felt like this is something that would be very polarizing as far as people who would agree or disagree with the decision, and even like a man-woman sort of thing that would be an interesting discussion to have. It basically boils down to Jennifer Lawrence's character is offered with a basically binary choice. And I feel like the choice she made was the wrong choice, theoretically, morally. I mean, I understand why she made the choice she made, but I felt like it was also a detriment to the story because the story ended after she made this choice very cliche and kind of underwhelming. Whereas if she made the choice she didn't make, that would have been a much more fulfilling story in my opinion. I will not say what that is. If once you see it, you'll understand, and then that would be a very great discussion point. Overall, though, I would say this film has great visuals, but some very glaring plot mistakes in my opinion that don't necessarily destroy this film, but definitely keep it from fulfilling, I feel like, the story's potential. And that's why I'm saying I would recommend seeing this film, just not necessarily in theaters. And yeah, I would say this is definitely it's not a bad film, but it's not necessarily a good film. In fact, if the two characters were not played by Jennifer Lawrence and Chris Pratt, which I feel like their chemistry is what the saving grace of this film, I would not have seen this movie if these were two other actors and actresses. But just remember, there's nothing new under the sun, and you have seen it before. So thank you so much for watching. I'm doing something different with this review. I'm trying to inject a little more me into this. I'm trying to do a lot more unscripted review of this, and I'm trying to, because I feel like all my reviews up to this point have been very scripted on my part, and I feel like that's probably why I haven't had very many views, and why I only have 3 subscribers, and thank you for my 3 subscribers, one of which is my coworker Keith, thank you Keith for subscribing. I hope you enjoyed this, and please, if you're a subscriber, share this with others, and however you can, word of mouth, social media, what have you. I mean, I do this because I enjoy movies, and I want to share my tidbits and my special blend of analysis on this film, because you have seen all these things in movies these days before. So thank you very, very much for watching this. I hope I can count on you to come back when my reviews, whenever I post them. Hopefully I'm going to try and keep posting these as new movies come up, and I can make new videos for them. So thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, great time. I'll see you next time.